I had just settled into my chair by the window, the soft morning light spilling across my Lake Tahoe home office, when the phone rang. My mornings were usually quiet coffee, the hum of the heater, and the occasional glance at the villa across the lake. At 62, I had grown fond of routine, and I liked it that way. Calm, measured with nothing urgent to disturb my peace. But the name flashing on the screen made my stomach drop. Kyle. My son. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice annoyingly casual. "I wanted to let you know. I gave the villa to my wife's parents." I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. "Excuse me. It's theirs now." "You can't come?" he added, almost as if reading from a script. I set the mug down, carefully keeping my tone, even though my chest burned. "Kyle, that's my villa," I said, voice flat, controlled. "The papers, everything. I bought that with decades of work with your father." "Yeah, Mom, I know. Doesn't matter. They'll take good care of it." "You'll understand," he replied like he was discussing a casual favor, and not the home that had been our family's legacy. I nodded slowly, keeping the outward calm that years of negotiation had taught me. Inside, it felt like fire betrayal twisting around every memory of the villa, every brick and beam that had cost sweat, patience, and sacrifice. I hung up, placing the phone on the desk with deliberate care. I stared at the lake beyond my window, its surface calm and untouched, and felt a hollow weight pressing against my chest. The villa, the sanctuary my husband and I had built, was gone, or at least in the hands of people who didn't see its meaning. I sank back into my chair, letting the quiet settle over me, and for the first time in years, I wondered if I could find a way to reclaim it, or at least my sense of control. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the faint ripple of sunlight across Lake Tahoe, and the villa came alive in my mind as it had when we first built it. The smell of fresh timber sawdust, mingling with pine from the surrounding forest, and the crisp lake air that had greeted us each morning during construction, all of it felt impossibly close, yet achingly distant. I remembered the day my husband James had guided me through the half-built rooms, his hand warm around mine, as we imagined what the villa would become. We had chosen every detail together, the pale stone tiles that caught the morning light just right, the wrought iron chandeliers that hung over the dining room where so many family dinners would be celebrated, the furniture we painstakingly picked from catalogs and local artisans. James had laughed when I insisted on a tiny reading nook tucked between the windows overlooking the lake, teasing that I was building a secret kingdom for my books. I had smiled, brushing a strand of gray from his forehead, feeling our shared dream take shape with each stroke of paint, each nail hammered into place. The villa had never been just a house. It was a repository of laughter, quiet mornings with coffee steaming in the living room. Snowstorms watched through large bay windows, with blankets wrapped around us, the glow of fireplaces reflecting in James's eyes. Even after he passed, the villa had been my refuge, a place where grief softened and memories of him and our life together felt tangible and alive. I had walked through its rooms hundreds of times, running my hands along walls, tracing the contours of counters and shelves, remembering the warmth of his presence, even in absence. And now it was gone, or at least the control over it was. Kyle's casual words replayed in my mind. "It's theirs now. You can't come." I could almost hear James's quiet disapproval, a gentle nudge reminding me that I had built something worth protecting, something that deserved more than resignation. The villa had been my anchor, my identity, the living echo of our years together. And that truth only deepened the sting, leaving me with a quiet, simmering resolve beneath the grief and nostalgia. I zipped up my small weekend bag deliberately slow, savoring the motions as if they were ordinary, when every fiber of my body screamed otherwise. The villa across the lake, My sanctuary had been claimed by Kyle and his wife's family, and yet I maintained a calm exterior, as though this were just another errand. I poured a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight scatter across the wooden floor, and allowed myself a quiet, controlled exhale. No one would guess the storm brewing beneath the surface. Stepping outside, I waved politely to my neighbor Elaine, who was tending her rose bushes. Her smile, warm and oblivious, reminded me of the community I had long guided quietly, the informal authority I had exercised over years of neighborhood projects and social gatherings. It struck me sharply. Here I was seemingly compliant, while inside plans had already begun forming, each thought methodical, precise. As I walked along the gravel path toward the car, I reviewed scenarios in my mind. Each possibility, each reaction from Kyle or his in-laws was a thread I began to weave into a larger strategy. I noted small details from previous visits to the villa, patterns in behavior, the way entitlement colored their decisions. The simmering anger under my composed exterior sharpened into clarity. Patience had served me well before, and now it would be my instrument. Sliding into the driver's seat, I let my gaze drift over the lake, letting the familiar sight of its calm waters settle my thoughts. Calm, yes, but calculated, deliberate. Every word Kyle had spoken, every arrogant smile had been stored away, ready to inform the choices I would make next. This weekend was not merely a retreat. It was reconnaissance, a preparation for reclaiming what was mine. Beneath the surface of polite composure, the wheels were turning quietly, inexorably toward action. I arrived at Marcus Chen's office just as the morning sun struck the marina across the bay, casting golden reflections over the water. Marcus, my lawyer for over 15 years, greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing glance. His office smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, a reassuring steadiness amid the chaos of my thoughts. I need to protect the villa. I began, keeping my voice measured. Kyle has handed it over to his wife's family. I can't let them treat it as their own. Marcus leaned back, tapping a pen against his desk. Legally, Margaret. There are ways to reinforce your rights, but timing is critical. If they've already taken possession, the process gets tricky. We'll need all property records, deeds, and any previous agreements. And keep in mind, family disputes escalate quickly. You want a strategy that's airtight, not reactive. I nodded, absorbing every word. Legalities alone weren't enough. I needed an edge. Later that afternoon, I met with Derek, my neighbor, and a tech consultant. His apartment smelled of solaring flux and coffee. He was already tinkering with a small array of sensors and motion detectors, casually lifting a circuit board. They'll act like owners, Derek said without looking up. We can set up responses, lights, sounds, even environmental triggers that are subtle but unmistakable. Psychological nudges. Nothing illegal, just enough to assert control and signal boundaries. I watched him outline possibilities, imagining each sequence, each reaction. He made suggestions about cameras, programmed lights, and discrete alerts, all designed to maintain legality, while amplifying the villa's presence as mine. By the time I returned home, the afternoon sun had softened. I leaned against the balcony railing, reviewing every option, weighing timing, cost, and risk. A plan was forming in my mind, a careful mix of legal and technological precision. Each choice sharpened my focus, turning anger into calculated determination. The villa was mine, and I intended to ensure that reality would be impossible to dispute. The villa seemed impossibly still that morning, sunlight spilling across the polished floors. Yet beneath the serene surface, every corner was being quietly transformed. I moved through the rooms with a precise rhythm, directing Derek as he installed cameras at discrete angles and motion sensors. Along hallways, each device calibrated to catch the slightest movement. The humming of equipment mingled with the scent of fresh pine from the lake breezes, drifting through open windows a reminder that the villa had always been alive with energy, now repurposed for defense. Legal protections were equally critical. Marcus had spent the previous night drafting supplemental documentation, ensuring any claims to the villa could be swiftly contested. I reviewed the papers, initialing each page, visualizing how they would hold up if challenged. It was methodical, almost meditative work proof that control could be maintained without confrontation, that the villa could be protected without losing its dignity. Derek moved from room to room, adjusting lights to respond to motion-setting sequences, where soft alerts escalated into more noticeable warnings. He explained each minor psychological cue, a flicker of lights here, a subtle audio alert. They're designed to unsettle intruders without crossing legality. I nodded, imagining Kyle and his in-laws stepping through the door unsuspecting, and the villa responding in ways they would not anticipate. I walked the property several times, rehearsing scenarios in my mind. What if Kyle hesitated at the threshold? What if his wife tried to assert dominance? What if her parents brought furniture or belongings ahead of time? Each question was answered in my mental plan. Each outcome rehearsed with exacting precision. By late afternoon, everything was in place. The villa looked untouched, pristine, an ordinary weekend retreat. Yet beneath the calm, the legal documents were secured. Sensors, ready cameras recording, and the subtle psychological cues poised to activate. I paused in the main living room, running my hands along the counter, taking in the view of the lake that had always grounded me. A low thrill of anticipation coursed through me, tempered by the patience and strategy I had honed over decades. The stage was set. Soon they would arrive confident and unchallenged, unaware that every detail had been anticipated, every move accounted for. And when that moment came, the villa would no longer just be a home, it would be a testament to deliberate, measured control and to the power of preparation over entitlement. The rumble of a rented SUV echoed up the gravel driveway, announcing their arrival before I even stepped outside. Kyle was at the wheel, his posture casual, a self-satisfied grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Beside him, his wife Lauren clutched a tote bag as if it contained the keys to the universe. Behind them, her parents shuffled out with the ease of people who had never been denied what they believed was rightfully theirs. I watched from the balcony, coffee cup in hand, as they unloaded boxes and furniture from the SUV, each item placed with meticulous certainty, their movements confident, almost theatrical. It was clear they expected no resistance, that the villa was theirs by virtue of entitlement alone. Kyle's dismissive wave caught my attention. He had already spotted me, his lips curling in a patronizing smile. "This is nothing, Mom. Just come inside," he called, as if he were inviting me to observe their dominion rather than participate. Lauren's smug glance met mine, the kind that signaled victory, the silent acknowledgement that she had already won. Her parents were equally assured, moving through the living room as if they had long rehearsed this choreography of occupation. My pulse tightened, but I remained outwardly calm, masking the surge of moral outrage that flared behind my eyes. I noted every detail, the way Kyle's shoulders tensed when he lifted a heavy box, the slight hesitation of Lauren when maneuvering a chair through the hallway, the way her father's attention flickered toward the stairwell, scanning the layout as though it were a map to be conquered. These small imperfections would be useful later data points for the plan I had set in motion. I sipped my coffee, letting the calm veneer settle over me. Beneath it, every muscle was coiled, every thought, cataloging movements, predicting reactions, anticipating mistakes. They had arrived believing they had taken what was mine, but I had spent days preparing for this moment, turning their confidence against them. As the last box was placed, Kyle stepped back, wiping his hands on his pants, his eyes surveying the villa like a king surveying his court. He didn't see the quiet watchfulness behind the windows, the careful attention to detail that would soon turn the tables. I set the cup down, feeling the thrill of anticipation, the moment approaching when the villa would remind them whose home it truly was. The villa was quiet, deceptively so, as I moved to my hidden control station in the study. Every sensor camera and alert was armed, waiting for the slightest disturbance. My heart beat steadily, not from fear but anticipation. Years of meticulous planning were about to meet their test. It started with a soft flicker in the hallway lights, barely noticeable, but perfectly timed. Then came the subtle voice from the speakers, calm yet firm. Unauthorized presence detected. Please leave immediately. Kyle froze mid-step, glancing around as the sound echoed through the house. Lauren stiffened her confident posture, faltering. I watched their reactions on the monitors, noting the panic rising like a tide. A motion sensor in the kitchen triggered a gentle spray of water, just enough to startle, not harm, while simultaneously illuminating the family in stark, shifting light. Lauren shrieked and yanked her hands back from the counter, and her parents scrambled to the doorway, eyes wide, muttering frantic questions. Kyle tried to assert control, raising his voice. Mom, turn it off. What is going on? His words bounced uselessly against the carefully programmed sequences. The audio escalated, layering commands, subtle warnings, and environmental cues, lights flickering in patterns that made the villa feel alive, unpredictable, disorienting. I allowed myself a small smile, watching the family stumble from room to room, overestimating their confidence, underestimating my preparation. Every misstep was recorded, every hesitation catalogued. This was not just a technological maneuver. It was a controlled orchestration, a demonstration that entitlement alone could not override foresight and careful planning. The villa responded seamlessly. Sensors detecting presence, activating lights, voice alerts, and water in staggered sequences. Kyle's face turned red. Lauren's smugness melted into fear, and her parents looked as if they had walked into an elaborate illusion. I leaned back, observing from my vantage point a mixture of satisfaction and empowerment, warming me from the inside. Hours of tension condensed into minutes of chaos for them, and yet not a single step crossed the line into harm. This was justice measured precise and unequivocal. I knew then that the villa was mine, not just in papers and permits, but in principle, in control, and in memory. Their confidence had been shattered, replaced by a dawning realization that possession without respect was meaningless. By the time Kyle, Lauren, and her parents recovered from the villa's subtle chaos, I was waiting in the main living room, calm and composed. The air was still the echoes of lights and water fading, leaving only the tension of expectation. Kyle stormed in first, his fists, clenched eyes blazing with frustration. Lauren followed, attempting to maintain her composure, while her parents lingered behind their faces, a mix of irritation and unease. You went too far, Mom, Kyle spat, voice sharp. This isn't funny. Turn it off. Give us the villa. I regarded him quietly, letting the seconds stretch, allowing the gravity of their panic to sink in. Kyle, I said steadily, the villa isn't yours to give, and it isn't yours to take. Lauren's smugness faltered as she glanced at the documentation on the table. Marcus had prepared everything, legal deeds, transfer papers, and notices, placing the villa under a trust dedicated to preservation and community use. I motioned to the files. This villa has been legally protected. It is now held by a foundation I established. You have no claim. Kyle stepped closer, attempting to intimidate, his voice rising. You can't do this. We've been handed the villa, Mom. You assumed entitlement overrides law? I interrupted, my voice calm but unwavering. It doesn't. You cannot negotiate what isn't yours, and no amount of arrogance changes the legal reality. Lauren's eyes widened as she realized the Foundation's documents left no loophole. Her parents exchanged worried glances, their confidence crumbling. Kyle ran his hands through his hair, the tension in his shoulders betraying his disbelief. "But this isn't fair," he muttered almost to himself. I let him stew in the truth. Fairness is measured in law and preparation, not in assumptions. You expected this villa to be yours by virtue of my absence and your convenience. But entitlement does not equate to ownership. The room remained quiet, except for their heavy breathing. I walked slowly toward the balcony, overlooking the lake, each step, deliberate asserting my presence. The villa is safe, protected, and respected. I have ensured that its legacy, the memories of those who built it, and the principle of rightful ownership remain intact. Nothing you do can undo this. Kyle slumped against the doorway defeated, and Lauren's composure shattered her parents, silent in shame. The realization hit them confidence without merit had no weight here. I stood at the center of the villa, resolute, empowered. Justice had been measured patient and decisive. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe fully, knowing the villa was secure, and so was my sense of self. The villa was still once more, sunlight drifting through the large windows, highlighting the warm tones of the wood and stone I had chosen so many years ago. I moved slowly through the rooms, letting my hands brush over the counters and railings, absorbing the quiet that had been so hard-earned. Each space carried echoes of laughter, conversations, and the presence of my late husband, James. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the calm I had fought to reclaim. I lingered in the living room, the lake beyond reflecting the afternoon sun like liquid gold. The chaos of the previous days, Kyle's arrogance, and the subtle chaos I had orchestrated seemed distant, now softened by the satisfaction of control regained. The villa was secure, legally protected, and most importantly, respected. Every step I took reminded me that patience, strategy, and resolve had guided me here, transforming betrayal into empowerment. Walking toward the kitchen, I paused at the nook James had insisted on, a place for quiet reading, shared coffees, and late-night plans. Memories surfaced, selecting tiles, arranging furniture, and long conversations about the dreams we had built together. The villa had always been more than a structure. It had been a vessel for love, effort, and identity. And now, standing in its calm embrace, I understood that protecting it had been about preserving more than walls and windows. It was about honoring a life lived with intention. I moved to the balcony, letting the breeze brush my face. The lake shimmered undisturbed by the turbulence of human disputes. I thought about Kyle, Lauren, and her parents, and the lessons this ordeal had taught me. Boundaries must be enforced. Respect cannot be assumed, and control is best exercised through clarity and foresight, rather than confrontation. My anger had cooled into something steadier, a deep, measured strength. Sitting in my favorite chair, I sipped a cup of tea and looked out over the water. The villa's silence was no longer empty. It was a presence of its own, a reminder of all I had endured and all I had reclaimed. Peace did not erase the past, but it allowed me to move forward with dignity, knowing that the life James and I built was honored, and that my own sense of self-respect had never been stronger.